Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 5 minutes after 10 o'clock, not a bad-looking day. And by the way, the weather is looking pretty good, even all the way through Mother's Day. It looks like you got good weather for the weekend, Robin.
Yes, I know.
So if
this is wonderful.
If you have a plan to go to the beach on Saturday,
I do. It's my mom.
Looks like it's going to be a good day.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. 1992, Warsaw, Poland. That's the place and the time we want to take you to right now. The book is called The Fourth Courier. It is an espionage thriller novel set in 1992 in post-Cold War Poland. Remember those years? It seems like just yesterday, right? All that stuff was in the news. Let's see. Timothy J. Smith is our guest. The story is pretty amazing, but Mr. Smith, actually, listen to this. He smuggled banned plays from behind the Iron Curtain. He maneuvered through occupied territories. He represented the United States at the highest levels of foreign government. And so he's got some background behind the story that he has crafted. Timothy Smith, good morning, Timothy. Thank you for calling in.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on the show.
Where are you? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Nice, France.
Oh, my gosh. That is so awesome. I want to be there. Is it nice there?
It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful. It's always beautiful here.
It's pretty nice. I like that. It's like a play on words, isn't it? It's nice and nice.
Yeah, well, it's easy to do.
So tell me about the story. Before we do that, I mean, just one quick question about it. Is it based on anything you actually did in your real life?
I lived in Poland for a couple of years during the time of the big transition or transformation from the communist era to a market economy, or otherwise you can say when Solidarity came to power and basically put the communists out of business in Poland, which basically was the fall of communism throughout Eastern Europe. I was not, and I was not an FBI agent or a CIA agent. I was an advisor to the Minister of Finance at the time. But I did have a lot of the stuff that happens in the book are actually incidents that happen to me or I'm familiar with. So there's a fair amount of truth in it.
Okay.
Real story stuff.
And that was what I suspected. I wasn't sure, though. That's why I wanted to start with that question. So let's talk about the fictional part, and then we'll probably interject a lot of questions about what you really did. Give us a thumbnail sketch or a movie trailer version of The Fourth Courier.
Okay, the story opens that there's been 3 murders in Warsaw, all in the same style. 3 men found along the Vistula River, which runs to the center of Warsaw. And on the hands of the 3rd victim, they've discovered traces of radiation. And that's made everybody very nervous that perhaps all 3 of these murdered men were couriers bringing nuclear material out of the former Soviet Union. The timing of the book is important because it takes place in April 1992, and the Soviet Union actually officially was dismantled Christmas Day 1991, so 3 to 4 months earlier. And at that moment in time, people were very nervous about how secure the nuclear material was in Russia, or the entire former Soviet Union, in fact. And so in my book, this incident becomes an international incident, and Solidarity government asks for help, and the United States sends an FBI agent to Poland to help the local police investigate what's really going on. There is some truth to that fear about the border being very porous and perhaps things not quite as secured as they should be. Mm-hmm. I was actually on a short consultancy in Latvia at that time, and I was meeting with some officials, including a decommissioned Russian general who was very unhappy about what had happened in Eastern Europe. And at the end of an official meeting, he told me, let's go someplace to talk where nobody can hear us. And so we walk out into the middle of this forest. I was completely baffled by what he wanted. And he turned to me at one point and said, I can get you anything you want. And I looked at him very puzzled, and he said, atomic. So that was the seed of the story, that actually I think this man was offering me something out of the nuclear arsenal that we actually talked about briefly.
Oh, wow.
What was going on with all that. So it was that sort of stayed in my mind, and when I decided I wanted to write about that period of time in Poland,
Wow.
that's how this story is the one that I wrote.
So if he said that to you, he could have said it to many other people as well.
I'm sure he probably did. It was one of those things where I didn't even know how to handle it. I was in a very foreign environment at that point. I never had anybody ever offer anything like that to me. I think he was just serious, but it was so outrageous. I couldn't even be sure.
So
but that was the fear that people had access to this stuff, and just bits of uranium could be used in a dirty bomb, that kind of thing.
Man, what would you use it for? I mean, other than to just create havoc and kill people, I don't even see a use for it. I don't even see how it could make you any money if that was the objective.
Well, if you had it and you were trying to sell it someplace, there would be a lot of takers, I think, for something like that. A lot of terrorist organizations today would like to get their hands on stuff like that because you can really do a dirty bomb very easily. You could just
there you go.
Put a Coke can full of stuff, and
that's a good answer to my question. Yeah, that does make sense. All right, let me ask you about words. Why in the information I have about you, it says you smuggled banned plays, right? What is it about?
It's actually,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. There's only one play, actually.
Oh, okay.
That was one play.
Okay, one play. But in general, we hear about stories about books being banned and et cetera. And in America, and in most of the free world, where books are embraced, even if you disagree with them. But to think that a play or any body of written work would be somehow a threat to somebody in charge, that's a pretty amazing. Words can be pretty powerful, obviously, if you have people actually afraid of them. Oh
yeah, for sure. But during the Soviet Union time, communist time, a lot of things were banned. When you think about I think they call it the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia, where they threw out the communists shortly after Poland threw out the communists. That was really headed by Havel, who was a playwright, and it could have been one of his plays. Actually, I don't know whose play I took out. It was early in the '70s, and none of those names meant anything to me. Mm-hmm. I was asked to take the play to the UC Berkeley's Department of Scandinavian History or Literature and pass it on so that somebody would get this out and know what to do with it. So that's what I did. I was a courier in a sense. I took out something that was contraband out of the country and brought it home. So
go back to the book now. The fourth courier. Do we understand who the first three are, or is that explained?
It is eventually explained, yes, but I don't want to really say because
that ruins the
spoiler.
But, okay, yeah, that is the tight wire we walk in when we talk to novelists. Right.
Yeah. Did you feel very, very fearful when you were going back and forth from freedom to communist countries?
No, not really. No, I knew that. We were watched. I was watched when I was there. I was first invited to the Soviet Union in 1989 while it still existed. And the story behind that is that Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the president of the Soviet Union at the time, had introduced some cooperative laws into the country to sort of make it a kind of a backdoor way for a market economy to sort of begin to take hold in the Soviet Union. And I was a co-op expert in the United States, and there were 15 of us who were invited to the Soviet Union to go around the country over a period of 3 weeks and talk to the people who were trying to form cooperatives, farmer cooperatives in particular, is what I dealt with. But we were watched the whole time, and we were never not on our own. So it wasn't a fearful situation.
So what is the espionage that is the picture that you paint in the book? Does it reflect the real espionage of the era or of any time? It must.
Yes.
Yeah, it has to.
Yeah, sure it does.
Yeah, and that's
one thing.
That's what the reviewers are saying.
Don't realize. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I apologize. I think there's a delay in the thing here, but I was just trying to say that a lot of the reviewers are saying that this is the way it is. I don't know how your reviewers know. Maybe they lived through some of it as well, or studied it, I guess.
Well, I think what they're really referring to in one way is that I have really been able to capture the atmosphere of that time. It was a very gloomy time in a way, even though there was a lot of excitement, a lot of hope around the political changes. The reality for ordinary families was that they were coming off of a very, very grim 45 years experience of being under Soviet control. But what I was going to say a few minutes ago, or a couple minutes ago, is that most Americans don't realize that the FBI does, in fact, have special agents around the world. Any country that is experiencing a lot of drug trafficking, human trafficking, terrorism, there are FBI agents posted to embassies everywhere, and you just have to go online and Google FBI International, and you'll find a map that shows all the spots where they are. I wasn't really that familiar with that until I began doing some research on a couple different novels, and didn't realize, these FBI guys are all over the place. So that's very real. Also, that
is interesting.
That's how I show spying and stuff. Yes, that's how I sensed it. I was often on assignments that involved me with the U.S. Embassy, and I would know kind of who was the CIA guy, in fact, and generally they were the regional security officers.
Oh, really?
Just figured that out.
Oh my gosh!
And do the guys from the FBI and the guys from the CIA, do they get along, or are they like just by themselves in each of their entities?
Well, the embassy works as a team in most of these countries, and there's kind of a core team, and then maybe a bigger all-embassy team. But I think people really do see themselves as part of a team, and the FBI and CIA are competitive in some ways, but they actually do different things. The CIA is espionage, and the FBI is crime. So when there's a crime committed that's of significant importance, the FBI would be the one to go in. If the counterparts, if the local authorities wanted help, it would be the FBI that would be going to do that. In this case, when you read the book, you realize there's a couple of different things going on that are connected, and so the FBI and the CIA work together, and that makes a lot of sense.
And when you were interviewing the agents, were they kind of reluctant to talk to you, or were they okay with what your project was?
I've interviewed FBI agents in 3 or 4 locations for different stories, and in each case, they've been very open with me. And when I started doing some research on this book, which is really quite a while back, I wrote a couple other things, and then I wanted to get this down before I forgot what Poland was really like, and then I put it aside for a while. But when I first started doing the research on this, I didn't know much about the FBI, and at that point, I was able to get a private tour of the training facilities in Quantico, Virginia, which I think would simply not happen in today's environment with all the fears of terrorism and all that sort of stuff. I just don't think that. I think things are much more closed than they were in the past. I mean, if I were really a well-known author, maybe that would make a difference. But as an unknown author at that time, certainly it was unusual. It would be unusual for me to be able to do that today.
Talk a little bit about the character development. One of the things that I think we as readers seem to like, I'm going to speak maybe for myself here, is like when there's a hot scene, a sexy scene, and like the James Bond-ish thing, but in a more serious way. And we've heard these stories in real life too about how female spies would use their sexuality to try to get information out of the men. And you have a scene like that in the book, correct?
I do, but I've actually kind of turned it around, and the person who does that in my book is a gay CIA agent, and he uses his sexuality to basically really help solve the case. So yes, but when you look at real life. I mean, I forget her name, the woman who's just been convicted of being a Russian spy in America. I think her name is Butina. She was using her sexuality to infiltrate the situation. So yes, that's exactly what happens.
So as an author,
and it makes sense.
As an author, how do I even ask this question? Does it just does that kind of a story, a part of a storyline, just seem to be necessary? It happens automatically. Are the characters more or less telling you what happens? Is that part of what happens between yourself and the page as the words leave your brain?
His words leave my brain. Yeah. I guess you can say the characters tell me what's going to happen, because I'm looking at the situation, at the setup, and think, what would really happen here? I mean, so I don't say, I want to have kind of a steamy sex scene, so now I've got to create a situation for that to happen. But in fact, I've created a situation where a steamy sex scene is the next obvious thing that's going to happen. But I don't want it just to be for the sex itself. It has to be part of really the character development, and we're learning something about these characters, and we're getting more sympathetic to them, or it has to move the plot along. It's not just to be sort of like, let's have a sex scene.
Right, yeah.
When you were speaking about uranium earlier, Larry had a story this morning about Iran's president announcing that he's going to be keeping excess uranium in heavy water from its nuclear program inside his country. Do we really have to be worried here in the United States about that statement?
I would worry about that statement. I think it's very important for us to keep a cap on any nuclear proliferation, and I think the wisest choice would be to continue to cooperate with Iran in doing that, but we're not doing that right now.
Well, this is obviously a well thought out storyline. Thank you for taking the time to be with us to talk about it. We're not done yet, but I want to give the listeners the information so they can find the book on their own. I found it where I find most books, which is Amazon. I'm guessing it's everywhere books are sold. Am I right?
That's right.
It is called The Fourth Courier. Timothy J. Smith is who you will look up. I found it on Amazon. It's available as an audio also. You haven't it's read to you, huh?
It's I believe the audio version, it will be out in June. I know it looks like it's available, but if you click on that, I think it says it's a pre-order. I might be wrong about that. Okay. I was originally told it was going to be audio in June, but I haven't followed up on that.
The reason I like audiobooks is simple. Robin and I read so many. We have to read parts of books to do this show. Mm-hmm. And so I find all my desk time where I can read an actual book. I can't delve into any of the ones that I really am attracted to, so I get them on audio. Then I'll listen to them in the car, and that's my the reading I do for the sheer joy of reading. But it's listening in that case.
When the Berlin Wall fell, how long did it take the people to assimilate that were living behind it? Was there a lot of chaos?
No, not at all. I forget the month the Berlin Wall came down. I think it was November of 1989. So this is the 30th year anniversary of that. No, Berlin really unified pretty quickly. The wall, was just in Berlin. It wasn't like a border wall, and it separated the city. And the two halves of the city were pretty different. And the communist side was pretty run down. The thing about communism that was so remarkable is just really how inefficient the system was, and so it really couldn't provide what was promised in a sense. So, and I was a little shocked by how really inefficient the whole thing was. But the German people, the two halves of Germany took some time. I'm not an expert on East versus West Germany, but in terms of Berlin, I visited it not too long after the whole situation, and it was pretty well unified very, very quickly.
I bet. Yeah, we have a pen pal friend who and we've known her for years. We've never met her in person, but she lived in East Germany and had these amazing stories of how she used to ride her bicycle to work, She had to take her 2 children to school on the same bicycle, and she could never get a car. It took her like years and years to get a car. It would take somebody years and years. And then when everything opened up, she moved to Bad Nauheim. I'm probably saying the name wrong, in southern Germany. Am I right? Bad Nauheim, something like that. And now she owns a car. She has a beautiful house. She's an artist, and life changed so much for those people. And politics aside, I think most people just simply want to be able to provide for themselves. And it sounds like the East Germany government wasn't enabling that.
No, it was. I mean, it was just like I said. It was just a very inefficient system. And one thing about I don't really deal with Germany in the book. It's just all set in Poland. But one thing about the book is that the main character, the FBI agent, has an affair with a young woman and gets to know her family really well. And through that, and she actually is somehow connected to the case. So it's not just a random choice of who she is. From my part, as the author, of course, he doesn't know. The main character doesn't know her connection at the beginning either. But through that relationship, he really. And through his eyes, the reader begins to see what life was like for ordinary Polish families at that time, and that was really what I really wanted to accomplish with the book. All my books have some sense of social justice or whatever you want to say. I've dealt with human trafficking. I've dealt with the Middle East conflict. I'm working on a book now that's about the refugees in Turkey coming over to Greece. And in the Fourth Courier, I wanted to really portray what the struggle was for Polish people at that time, because it really was a struggle. One of the things that what I was there for, very briefly, was, this sounds very dry, but I was an advisor to the Minister of Finance to introduce long-term mortgage financing to Poland for the first time in Polish history. And for 45 years, people had been provided their housing by the government. They never had to pay for it, but it was terrible. They would wait 15, 20 years to be able to move 4 or 6 people into like 200 square feet. And it was, and buildings were almost in ruins before they were even occupied. And everything was built out of these huge prefab slabs of concrete. And those are the kinds of things that really left people kind of in despair at the end of that whole communist era.
I think it's a great way to illustrate where we don't want to go in our country, and we have so many people wanting us to kind of go in that direction that I hopefully they're paying attention to somebody who can show it what it really was like, and why nobody wants everybody who lived through that doesn't want to go back to that.
You had founded the Smith Prize for Political Theater. What is some of the criteria to be a candidate?
The criteria, excuse me?
To be a candidate for the Smith Prize.
Okay. Well, the Smith Prize, the basic instruction is take a big global issue or something of real significance today, and that can be racism, immigration, climate change, whatever. But show the story through an intimate story. So make it personal to a family or individual, so that we understand what these things really mean to people who are being affected by it. So, and that's sort of the rule I apply to my own writing. That's what I try to do. I try to take a big picture story, but I show it what it really means to, for instance, the young girls in trafficked into prostitution. That's the story in Cooper's Promise. In the book called Vision of Angels, which is about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I follow 4 families who get interwoven because of a terrorist bomb threat. To be a candidate for the Smith Prize for Political Theater, it's really a matter of having gone through one of several playwright development programs in the United States, or be nominated by one of about 200 nonprofit community theaters in the United States. And there are a couple of other avenues for doing it. And But it's not something that every playwright in America can just simply send in a play. It's actually a commission to write a new play. And it's been pretty exciting to see this group of people, these playwrights, really emerge and do some great things. The woman who won the Smith Prize in 2013 won the Pulitzer Prize for drama last year. So it's been just a really remarkable growth for these people. It's been great.
Yeah, I love that question, Robin, and I love the answer. It shows some real depth to the work that you do. Timothy J. Smith, thank you so much. The book we've been focusing on is the new book called The Fourth Courier. There are other books by Timothy Smith on Amazon, and I'm sure all bookstores. Thank you, Timothy.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It was fun.
We'll be right back.
Fox News, I'm Chris Foster. Police thought it was a boy at first. It's actually a girl now suspected of a shooting at her